Jasmine Wilson stared directly into Judge Maxwell Thornton's cold blue eyes as he laughed at her, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "Another troublemaker who thinks she knows the law," he sneered, unaware of the smartphone recording. In her backpack. Little did this powerful judge know that the 16-year-old black girl standing before him wasn't a defendant at all, but Jasmine Wilson Reynolds, Harvard law prodigy and the youngest undercover investigator the Department of Justice had ever dispatched. Her mission had just gotten personal. Would she expose the corruption or become its next victim? Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in justice for all, hit that like and subscribe button because tomorrow's special episode about courtroom justice warriors will leave you speechless. Jasmine Wilson Reynolds wasn't your average 21-year-old. While most people her age were still finishing college or figuring out their first jobs, she had already graduated from Harvard Law School at 19, stunning professors with her brilliant legal mind and unwavering commitment to justice. Now sitting in the sterile conference room at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division in Washington, D.C., she listened intently as her supervisor, Marcus Johnson, slid a thick folder across the table. "Westwood County courts have a serious problem," Marcus explained, his expression grim. "We've received 43 formal complaints about systematic discrimination in the past 18 months alone. Black defendants are receiving harsher sentences across the board, but the juvenile courts are where it's most egregious." Jasmine opened the folder, her eyes widening at the statistics. 340% longer sentences for black juveniles compared to white peers for identical offenses? This can't be legal. It's not, but proving deliberate discrimination requires more than statistics, Marcus sighed. "We need someone on the inside, someone who can document the discrimination firsthand without raising suspicions." Jasmine felt her heart rate quicken. "You want me to go undercover?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Your age is an advantage here. With some makeup and the right clothes, you could easily pass for 16. We've created a complete identity for you as Jasmine Wilson, a transfer student with a minor record from another county." "I'll do it," Jasmine said without hesitation, thinking of her brother Darius. 7 years ago, he'd been sentenced to 5 years for a crime he didn't commit by a judge who barely looked at the evidence. That experience had driven her to become a lawyer, to fight the system from within. Marcus looked concerned. "I need to be clear about the risks. Westwood County looks pristine on the surface, wealthy suburbs and manicured lawns, but there's deep-rooted racism beneath that polished exterior. If they discover who you really are—" "I understand the risks," Jasmine insisted. "Someone needs to expose what's happening there." The following week, after intensive preparation and briefings, Jasmine found herself sitting in the back of Westwood County Courthouse, her hair styled differently, wearing clothes that made her look younger, with a backpack containing hidden recording devices. She was there to observe before attempting to enter the system herself. What she witnessed that morning made her blood boil. Judge Maxwell Thornton, a 60-year-old white man with cold blue eyes and an imposing presence, handled 2 cases back-to-back. The first, a 17-year-old white boy named Bradley Fletcher, caught with enough prescription pills to constitute felony possession with intent to distribute. The second, a 15-year-old black boy named Deshaun Harris, accused of stealing a pair of sneakers from a department store. "Given your excellent academic record and the support of your family, Mr. Fletcher, I believe this was an isolated mistake," Judge Thornton said kindly. 12 months probation and community service. Keep your nose clean, son." 20 minutes later, the same judge glared down at Deshaun. "Another one from Lincoln Heights. I'm tired of seeing your kind in my courtroom. 6 months in juvenile detention. Maybe that will teach you some respect for other people's property." Jasmine clutched her notebook so hard her knuckles turned white. The injustice was even more blatant than the report suggested. As she furiously scribbled notes, she felt someone watching her. Looking up, she locked eyes with a woman in a tailored suit standing near the prosecutor's table. With a jolt of panic, Jasmine recognized Patricia Winters, an attorney who had guest lectured at Harvard during Jasmine's final year. If Patricia recognized her, the entire operation could be compromised before it even began. Jasmine quickly lowered her head and slipped out of the courtroom, her heart pounding. The mission was already proving more dangerous than anticipated, but what she'd witnessed only strengthened her resolve. These teens needed someone to fight for them, and she was ready to take on the system no matter the personal cost. The abandoned Millbrook Park seemed perfect for Jasmine's plan. Located in an affluent neighborhood, with strict trespassing enforcement, it was known that police regularly patrolled the area and were quick to arrest any teenagers loitering after hours, especially those who didn't belong in the neighborhood. As darkness fell, Jasmine sat on a park bench, her hoodie pulled up, deliberately looking suspicious while keeping her hidden camera recording. It took less than 30 minutes. "Hey, you, this park is closed." The police cruiser's spotlight blinded her as two officers approached, hands on their holsters. Jasmine played her role perfectly, the nervous teenager trying to explain herself. "I was just sitting here, not bothering anyone." "ID now," demanded the taller officer, Officer Brennan according to his nameplate. His partner, Officer Diaz, circled behind her. "I forgot it at home," Jasmine mumbled, knowing this would escalate things. "Of course you did," Officer Brennan said with a smirk. "Hands against the wall. Now." The officers were unnecessarily rough during the pat-down, making comments under their breath. When they found nothing illegal, their frustration was palpable. "You're under arrest for trespassing and obstruction," Officer Brennan announced, tightening the handcuffs painfully around Jasmine's wrists. "Obstruction? I didn't obstruct anything," Jasmine protested, genuinely shocked by the additional charge. "Arguing with an officer." "Resisting arrest," Officer Brennan added casually, shoving her into the back of the cruiser. Through the partition, Jasmine heard the officers talking. "Another Lincoln Heights troublemaker," Officer Diaz said. "Probably casing houses in the neighborhood." "They all say they weren't doing anything wrong," Officer Brennan laughed. "Always playing the race card when they get caught." At the station, the discrimination continued. Jasmine watched as a white teenage girl brought in for actual vandalism was processed quickly. Her parents called immediately and officers speaking respectfully to her. Meanwhile, Jasmine was left handcuffed to a bench for over 3 hours, her requests for a phone call repeatedly ignored. During booking, when she again asked to call her parents, the desk sergeant rolled his eyes. "You people always know your rights, don't you? Never know how to follow the law, but always know your rights." By morning, exhausted and sore from the uncomfortable bench, Jasmine was finally assigned a public defender, a harried-looking woman named Ms. Cooper, who barely made eye contact as she flipped through Jasmine's file. "Trespassing and obstruction. First offense on record. Judge Thornton's courtroom in 30 minutes. He'll probably give you community service if you plead guilty and apologize," Ms. Cooper said mechanically, already gathering her papers to leave. "Don't I get to explain what happened?" Jasmine asked. Ms. Cooper sighed impatiently. "Look, the officers say you were trespassing in a restricted area and became confrontational. With Judge Thornton, your best bet is to plead guilty, act remorseful, and get out with minimal punishment. Trust me on this." Exactly 30 minutes later, Jasmine stood before Judge Thornton, the same man she had watched discriminate against Deshaun Harris. Up close, his disdain was even more apparent. "Another one from Lincoln Heights High School," he remarked, looking down at her file. "What is it about your community that fails to teach respect for the law or private property?" Jasmine remained silent, her hidden recorder capturing every word. "Nothing to say for yourself." "Typical." Judge Thornton leaned forward. "Based on the officer's report of your confrontational attitude and the ongoing problem of teens from your neighborhood trespassing in Millbrook, I'm setting bail at $1,000. Ms. Cooper looked surprised. "Your Honor, this is a first offense, minor trespassing charge. The standard bail would be—" "I'm aware of standard procedures, Counselor," Judge Thornton cut her off coldly. "Perhaps a night in juvenile holding. We'll teach this young lady some manners." As Jasmine was led away, a court officer named Williams studied her with narrowed eyes. "You don't seem too upset for someone who just got an excessive bail," he commented suspiciously. Jasmine quickly adopted a more frightened expression, but she worried she'd inadvertently broken character. Later, as she sat in a holding cell, she overheard Officer Williams speaking to another court employee outside. "Something's off about the Wilson girl. Too composed, too observant. Doesn't act like the usual kids we get." "You think she's up to something?" the other person asked. I don't know, but I'll be keeping an eye on her. Judge Thornton wants us to handle troublemakers properly. The ominous way he said, handle, sent a chill down Jasmine's spine. She'd expected discrimination, but this sounded like something more organized, more sinister. Do you find it shocking how differently the justice system treated Jasmine compared to the white teenage girl at the police station? Comment number 1 if you believe this kind of discrimination happens in real courts today. Or comment number 2 if you think these situations are exaggerated. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support stories that expose social injustice. The question remains, what exactly did Officer Williams mean by handling troublemakers properly? And what might happen to Jasmine in juvenile detention? Could our undercover attorney be walking into something far more dangerous than she anticipated? The Westwood County Juvenile Holding Facility was a stark contrast to the affluent county that funded it. While the courthouse gleamed with marble and polished wood, the detention center had peeling paint, flickering fluorescent lights, and a pumice, pervasive smell of industrial cleaner that failed to mask the underlying odors. Jasmine was placed in a cell block with 7 other girls, 6 of whom were black or Hispanic. During the first day's recreational period, she carefully struck up conversations, playing the role of the nervous first-timer while gathering information. Judge Thornton always does that with the bail, explained Tiana, a 16-year-old who had already been there for 3 weeks, awaiting trial for fighting at school. White kids get released to their parents. We get stuck here. How long have most of you been waiting for your cases to be heard? Jasmine asked. Too long, said Keisha, another girl. My white friend and I both got caught shoplifting. Same store, same day. She had her hearing the next week, got community service. I've been here 42 days waiting for a trial date. As days passed, Jasmine documented everything, using the small recording devices disguised as hair accessories and her seemingly innocent journal entries that were actually detailed case notes. A pattern emerged that was even more disturbing than simple discrimination. Through careful conversations with staff and other detainees, Jasmine learned that Westwood County had privatized its juvenile detention system 5 years ago. The company running it, Sentinel Youth Services, was paid per occupied bed, creating a financial incentive to keep the facility full. One night, Jasmine overheard 2 guards talking during shift change. Thornton sent over 3 more today. One said, "We're at 98% capacity now." Good timing with quarterly bonuses coming up, the other replied with a laugh. This prompted Jasmine to dig deeper. During computer privilege time, she managed to access public records by claiming to be researching for a school project. What she found confirmed her suspicions. Judge Thornton had financial connections to Sentinel Youth Services through a complex web of shell companies and investment groups. The judge wasn't just discriminating based on personal prejudice. He was profiting from sending black and Hispanic teens to detention. After a week inside, Jasmine finally got access to a phone during her scheduled call time. With guards monitoring all calls, she couldn't directly contact her DOJ handler, so she called the prearranged cover number that would relay her message. "Mom, it's me," she said, following their established protocol. "Yes, I'm doing homework. And learning a lot about Sentinel services. Really fascinating business practices. Some of the class materials are missing, though. Could you scan pages 98 through 104 and send them to Ms. Johnson?" This coded message would tell her handler to investigate Sentinel Youth Services, specifically looking at their financial records from 1998 to 2004, when the company was formed and the initial contracts with Westwood County were established. Call seemed to go well, but that night, something unexpected happened. During a supposedly random cell check, guards confiscated Jasmine's journal, claiming it violated facility rules by having a hard cover that could be fashioned into a weapon. "But all my school notes are in there," Jasmine protested genuinely, concerned about losing her documented evidence. "Should have thought about that before breaking the rules," the guard said with a smirk, tucking the journal under his arm. The next morning, Jasmine was called to meet with the facility administrator, something unusual for a short-term detainee, awaiting trial. The warden, Richard Blackwell, was a tall man with a military haircut and cold eyes. His office walls were covered with photos of him shaking hands with politicians and business leaders. "Miss Wilson," he said, studying her with unsettling intensity. "I understand you've been asking a lot of questions during your short stay with us." Jasmine's heart raced, but she maintained her teenage persona. "I'm just trying to understand. What's happening, sir? This is all new to me." "Is it?" he asked, sliding her confiscated journal across the desk. It was open to a page where she had documented dates, times, and names of cases she'd observed. "This doesn't look like the notebook of a frightened first-time offender. This looks like someone conducting an investigation." Jasmine's mind raced for a plausible explanation. "It's for a school project on the justice system. I thought since I was here anyway." Warden Blackwell leaned forward. "Here's what I find interesting, Miss Wilson. We ran your fingerprints last night, standard procedure, except there's no record of Jasmine Wilson in any school database in Lincoln Heights. Care to explain that?" Before Jasmine could respond, a guard knocked and entered. "Sir, Judge Thornton is on line 1. Says it's urgent." "We'll continue this. Conversation later," Warden Blackwell said ominously. "Take her back to her cell, full isolation. No contact with other detainees." As the guard led her away, Jasmine realized with growing dread that her cover was in serious jeopardy. Someone had made the connection, potentially from her coded phone call, and now both the judge and the warden were suspicious. Her hidden recording devices might be discovered next, and without her journal, much of her documentation was already compromised. Worst of all, her handler at the DOJ hadn't acknowledged receipt of her coded message. As she was locked in isolation, Jasmine wondered if the conspiracy reached higher than she'd initially believed. Was someone at the DOJ itself compromised? Had she just walked into a trap far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated? After 3 days in isolation, with only brief human contact during meal deliveries, Jasmine was informed that her bail had been posted anonymously. This unexpected development both relieved and concerned her. Who had paid the $1,000 bail, and why? As she gathered her belongings minus her confiscated journal, a guard handed her a note that simply read, "Court date Tuesday, 9 a.m., Judge Thornton's courtroom. Don't miss it." The implied threat was clear. Outside the detention center, Jasmine found no one waiting. Her DOJ handler hadn't sent anyone, which confirmed her fears that something had gone wrong with their communication. Using a payphone, she called the backup emergency number. "Operation compromised," she reported quickly. "Need extraction." "Stay in place," came the terse reply. "Continue as planned. Handler will contact." This wasn't the response she'd expected. Standard protocol for a compromised undercover operation was immediate extraction. Being told to continue meant either the DOJ didn't understand the danger she was in, or they had reasons to want her to remain despite the risks. With few options, Jasmine found a cheap motel and spent the weekend preparing for her court date. Without access to her handler or the evidence from her confiscated journal, she would need to rely on her legal knowledge and the remaining recording devices she still had hidden in her clothes and backpack. Tuesday morning arrived with immediacy. Presence outside the courthouse, something unusual for routine juvenile cases. As Jasmine approached, a reporter thrust a microphone toward her. "Are you Jasmine Wilson? There are rumors circulating that your case involves discrimination. Do you have a statement?" Jasmine was startled, but quickly realized this might work to her advantage. With cameras present, Judge Thornton would need to be more careful. "I just want a fair hearing," she said, looking directly into the camera. "Every American deserves equal treatment under the law, regardless of race or background." Inside, the courtroom was unusually full. Jasmine spotted several community activists she recognized from her research, including Reverend Mitchell from the Lincoln Heights Baptist Church, who had been vocal about judicial discrimination. Someone had rallied support for her case. When her case was called, Jasmine approached the bench without her assigned public defender. "Where is Ms. Cooper?" Judge Thornton demanded. "I've decided to represent myself, Your Honor," Jasmine stated clearly. Judge Thornton's eyebrows rose. A 16-year-old representing herself? This should be entertaining. "It's my constitutional right," Jasmine replied calmly, "as established in Ferretta v. California, though the court typically appoints standby counsel for juvenile defendants. which I would welcome. The judge's smug expression faltered slightly at her legal knowledge. Very well, proceed. What followed was a masterful display of legal argumentation. Jasmine methodically challenged the officer's account of her arrest, cited relevant case law regarding reasonable suspicion for stops and searches, and questioned the excessive bail for a first-time non-violent offense. Furthermore, she continued, confidently, I would direct the court's attention to the statistical disparity in pretrial detention rates between white and non-white juveniles in this jurisdiction, which suggests a troubling pattern that may constitute a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The courtroom had fallen completely silent. Judge Thornton stared at her, his face reddening. The reporters were scribbling furiously. Where exactly did you learn all this legal jargon, Miss Wilson? The judge asked suspiciously. Public library, Your Honor. America's greatest institution. All it takes is a library card and a desire to understand one's rights. A few spectators chuckled, and Jasmine noticed camera phones recording the exchange. This was working better than she could have hoped, creating a public record of the judge's behavior. After her presentation, Judge Thornton seemed to realize he was being watched too closely to dismiss her arguments outright. With visible reluctance, he announced, in light of the defendant's arguments and lack of prior record, I am dismissing the obstruction charge and reducing the trespassing to a warning. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in applause. As Jasmine gathered her belongings, Reverend Mitchell approached with a wide smile. Remarkable job, young lady. We need more young people like you who know their rights. Local activists surrounded her outside the courthouse, praising her courage. Her reporter asked how it felt to win against Judge Thornton, known for his harsh sentences. This isn't about winning or losing, Jasmine replied carefully. It's about ensuring our justice system treats everyone equally, regardless of race or zip code. For the first time since her arrival in Westwood County, Jasmine felt she was making progress. The public attention would make it harder for Judge Thornton to continue his discriminatory practices without scrutiny. Her victory, though small, felt significant. That evening, as media coverage of the teen legal prodigy spread across local news and social media, Jasmine finally received a secure message from her DOJ handler. Good work. Continue gathering evidence. Backup coming soon. Relieved that her mission was still active and supported, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of optimism. Perhaps the system could be changed from within, after all. That optimism lasted exactly 4 hours and 23 minutes. Shortly after midnight, her motel room door burst open. 4 police officers stormed in, guns drawn, shouting for her to get on the ground. Before she could respond, she was handcuffed, read her rights, and informed she was under arrest for possession of illegal substances with intent to distribute. This is ridiculous, Jasmine protested, as an officer held up a bag of pills allegedly found in her room. Those aren't mine. This is a setup. Officer Brennan, the same one who had arrested her for trespassing, smiled coldly. Funny how you troublemakers always say that. Judge Thornton was right about you. As they dragged her out, Jasmine caught a glimpse of the motel manager watching with a satisfied expression. She realized with sinking dread that while she'd been focused on the courthouse, she'd underestimated how far the corruption extended throughout the county. The judge had allies everywhere, and her small victory had only motivated them to hit back harder. This time there would be no quick hearing, no media presence to protect her. With planted drug evidence, she was facing years in prison, not just juvenile detention. The trap had closed around her, and she had walked right into it. The charges against Jasmine were severe. Possession of oxycodone with intent to distribute, a felony that carried a potential sentence of 5 to 10 years. The quantity of pills allegedly found in her motel room, 38 tablets, was just enough to qualify for the higher-level offense, but not so many that it would seem implausible for a teenager to possess them. Her bail hearing was a stark contrast to the previous court appearance. This time she was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands and feet shackled. No media was present. They had been told the courtroom was closed for security reasons. The few spectators were court employees and what appeared to be plain clothes. Officers. Judge Thornton didn't bother hiding his satisfaction. Well, Miss Wilson, it seems your brief legal career has come to an unfortunate end. Drug distribution is a serious offense. These charges are fabricated, Jasmine stated firmly. I demand an independent test of the evidence for fingerprints and an investigation into who had access to my room. Demanding things now, are we? Judge Thornton's smile was cold. Bail is set at $100,000. Next case. The gavel came down with finality, and Jasmine was led away before she could protest further. In the holding area, a new public defender introduced himself, a nervous man named Alan Richards who seemed more intimidated by the case than she was. Look, the evidence is pretty damning, Richards whispered, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. The officers had a warrant based on an anonymous tip. Everything was by the book. It was planted evidence, Jasmine insisted. This is retaliation for my last court appearance. Richards shifted uncomfortably. Between us, you should consider taking a plea deal. Judge Thornton specifically requested your case. He never does that for routine drug charges. Someone wants to make an example of you. I won't plead guilty to something I didn't do, Jasmine said firmly. Richards lowered his voice further. Then you should know the prosecutor is pushing to try you as an adult. Maximum sentencing. Judge Thornton seems determined to put you away for a long time. As Richards left, promising to see what he could do about a plea deal, Jasmine was transported back to detention. This time, however, she wasn't going to the juvenile facility, but to the adult county jail to await trial, an unusual move that required special approval from a judge. At the county jail, Jasmine realized how much more dangerous her situation had become. While being processed, she overheard two officers discussing her case. Thornton wants this one buried deep, one said quietly. Says she's been asking too many questions about the Sentinel program. Another troublemaker thinking she can change. The system, the second officer replied with a chuckle. She'll learn. Jasmine was placed in a cell block with adult women, many facing serious charges. She kept to herself, trying to process her situation and develop a plan. Her remaining recording devices had been discovered and confiscated during the jail's more thorough search procedures. She had no way to document what was happening or contact her handler. 3 days into her stay, Jasmine was approached by the prosecutor, District Attorney Rebecca Lawson, a sharp-featured woman with calculating eyes. Miss Wilson, I thought we should chat, Lawson said, sitting across from Jasmine in the visitation room. Your case has attracted some attention in my office. Because it's a setup, Jasmine replied evenly. Lawson smiled thinly. What's interesting is how a 16-year-old from Lincoln Heights suddenly displays the legal knowledge of a law school graduate. We did some digging. There's no record of you attending Lincoln Heights High before last month. Your supposed address belongs to an elderly couple who've never heard of you. Your fingerprints don't match any database. Jasmine remained silent, realizing the prosecutor was fishing for information. Who are you really? Lawson asked directly. FBI? State Attorney's Office? When Jasmine didn't respond, Lawson stood. Have it your way. Just know that Judge Thornton has friends in every level of government in this county. Whatever agency sent you, they can't protect you now. After Lawson left, Jasmine was returned to her cell block. That evening, during the recreation period, 2 inmates cornered her in a blind spot away from the security cameras. Both were much larger than Jasmine, and one held a sharpened toothbrush. Nothing personal, the woman with the makeshift weapon said quietly. We were told to send a message. Back off whatever you're investigating, or next time it won't just be a warning. Before Jasmine could respond, a guard called out, "Recreation time over." The women melted away, leaving Jasmine shaken but unharmed. The message was clear. Someone had enough influence to order an attack on her within the jail itself. When she returned to her cell, she discovered that her small collection of personal items had been searched. Her legal notes, written on commissary purchased, paper were missing. The few items of evidence she had managed to document since her second arrest, dates, names, overheard conversations, were gone. That night, lying on her bunk staring at the ceiling, Jasmine faced the reality of her situation. The conspiracy was larger and more dangerous than anyone at the DOJ had anticipated. Judge Thornton wasn't acting alone, but was part of a network that extended through law enforcement, the prosecutor's office and the detention facilities. They could control what happened to her in custody, fabricate evidence, and potentially even arrange for her to be seriously harmed or worse. For the first time since beginning her undercover assignment, Jasmine felt truly afraid. She was isolated, without resources or backup, facing enemies who controlled every aspect of the system she was trying to expose. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had come to document discrimination in the courts, only to become its target in ways far more sinister than she had imagined. As dawn broke, Jasmine made a difficult decision. She would need to adapt her strategy. Direct confrontation had only made her a target. To survive and complete her mission, she would need to find allies within the system itself, people who might be willing to help her expose the corruption from within. It was a desperate plan, but she had run out of alternatives. On her 5th day in the county jail, Jasmine noticed a guard who seemed different from the others. Officer Rodriguez didn't participate in the casual racism that characterized many of the staff interactions, and she had intervened subtly when tensions rose between inmates. During meal distribution, Jasmine carefully engineered a moment to speak privately. "I need help," she whispered, as Officer Rodriguez collected her tray. "People in this system are in danger, including me." Officer Rodriguez gave no indication she'd heard, but that night, Jasmine found a small note under her dinner tray. "Medical complaint tomorrow morning." The next day, Jasmine reported a headache at the morning check. Officer Rodriguez escorted her to the medical unit, and during the walk with no cameras in the corridor, the guard finally spoke. "My brother was sent to prison by Judge Thornton 3 years ago. Non-violent offense, 7-year sentence. White guy who committed the same crime got probation." "I'm investigating him," Jasmine admitted carefully, "but I've been cut off from my contacts." Officer Rodriguez nodded. "There's a reporter who's been looking into discrimination in Westwood courts, Michael Chen from the Tribune. I can get a message to him. Tell him to look into Sentinel Youth Services and their financial connection to Judge Thornton. And I need a lawyer who isn't afraid of the judge, someone outside the county if possible." 2 days later, Jasmine was informed she had a legal visit. Instead of her appointed public defender, she was met by Taylor Washington, a well-known civil rights attorney from the neighboring county. "I received an interesting call from a journalist friend," Washington said, once they were alone in the consultation room. "He mentioned a young woman with unusual legal knowledge facing trumped-up charges. I had to see for myself." Jasmine studied the attorney carefully before making her decision. "What I'm about to tell you puts us both at risk. Are you sure you want to be involved?" Washington's expression was resolute. "I've been trying to build a case against judicial discrimination in this county for years. If you have evidence, I'm all in." Jasmine took a deep breath and revealed her true identity, explaining the DOJ investigation and how she'd been cut off. After discovering the financial connections between Judge Thornton and the private detention facilities, Washington was stunned but quickly shifted to strategy. "We need to get you out of here first. I'll file motions challenging the evidence and the circumstances of your arrest. Meanwhile, Michael Chen is already digging into the Sentinel connection." Over the next 2 weeks, Washington proved to be exactly the ally Jasmine needed. The attorney filed multiple motions, requested evidence analysis, and most importantly, began tracking patterns in Thornton's sentencing that showed clear racial disparities. Michael Chen published a preliminary article raising questions about the juvenile justice system in Westwood County, carefully avoiding mentioning Jasmine's case directly while drawing attention to the issue. Their big break came when Officer A. Rodriguez managed to pass along visitor logs from the Juvenile Detention Center. The logs showed Judge Thornton making monthly visits to meet privately with Warden Blackwell, meetings that weren't part of any official judicial oversight function. "This could establish the connection," Washington said excitedly during a legal visit. Chen found incorporation documents for Sentinel that suggest Thornton was an early investor through a shell company called Westwood Holdings. "We need bank records," Jasmine insisted. "Quarterly payments that correspond with detention rates." "Chen's working on it. He has a source at First National who might be willing to talk." Their progress came to an abrupt halt one Tuesday morning, when Jasmine arrived for a scheduled court hearing to find Taylor Washington absent. Judge Thornton seemed pleased as he announced, "It appears your counsel is unable to join us today. We'll proceed with your court-appointed defender." Alan Richards sat at the defense table, looking more nervous than ever. When Jasmine questioned him about Washington's absence, he whispered, "She's been temporarily suspended from practicing. Bar Association emergency hearing about alleged ethics violations, something about coaching a juvenile client to lie in court." Jasmine felt the blood drain from her face. They had targeted Washington's law license to remove her from the case. The coordinated attack confirmed what she had suspected. Judge Thornton was part of a larger network of powerful figures in Westwood County who protected each other's interests. Back in her cell that evening, Officer Rodriguez slipped her a newspaper clipping. Michael Chen had been fired from the Tribune for journalistic ethics violations after pressure from several major advertisers threatened to pull funding from the paper. The preliminary investigation into Sentinel Youth Services had been shelved. "They're systematically cutting off all your support," Rodriguez whispered. "Be careful, they're watching your communications now, recorded your last call with Washington." The next morning, Jasmine was informed that due to security concerns, she was being moved to solitary confinement. The small concrete cell had no windows, only a metal slot in the door for meal delivery. 23 hours a day in isolation, with 1 hour for exercise in a small enclosed yard, alone. On her third day in solitary, the door unexpectedly opened outside of the normal schedule. Judge Thornton himself stood there with 2 guards. "Leave us," he instructed the guards, who hesitated but complied, remaining just outside. Once they were alone, Thornton's facade of judicial propriety dropped entirely. "Whoever you are, you've caused me significant inconvenience. Washington was getting too close to matters that don't concern her. Judicial discrimination concerns everyone in a democracy," Jasmine replied coolly. Thornton laughed. "Is that what you think this is about? Just some racial bias. The system works exactly as designed, keeping certain communities in check while benefiting those who understand how to use it properly." "It's corruption," Jasmine said flatly, "and I've documented enough to bring charges." "Have you?" Thornton moved closer, intimidating in the small space. "Your lawyer has been disbarred, your journalist friend is unemployed, your evidence has disappeared, and most importantly, I know you've been gathering information on the Sentinel program, which means I know exactly who sent you." Jasmine felt a chill. If he knew about her DOJ connection, why hadn't he exposed her? Thornton answered her unspoken question. "Certain people at the federal level have investments in Sentinel too. Did you really think your little investigation had approval from the top? Your handler has gone silent because they've been ordered to abandon you." Whether this was true or just psychological manipulation, Jasmine couldn't tell, but the lack of contact from the DOJ was concerning. If higher-level officials were involved in the privatized detention scheme, her mission may have been compromised. From within. "One last thing," Thornton added as he turned to leave. "I've taken the liberty of having officers visit your parents' home in Silver Springs. Lovely place. Would be a shame if something happened there while they were sleeping." The threat to her family shook Jasmine more than anything else. As the cell door closed behind the judge, she sat on the edge of her bunk, trembling with a combination of rage and fear. They had neutralized every ally she had found, isolated her completely, and now threatened her family. The corruption ran deeper than she could have imagined, possibly reaching into the very agency that had sent her to investigate. Is justice truly blind when those sworn to uphold it abuse their power so brazenly? Comment number 1 if you think our justice system needs complete reform. Or comment number 2 if you believe only a few bad actors taint an otherwise fair system. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support stories that expose the dark reality many face in our courts. The question hangs heavy. With all her allies neutralized, her family threatened, and possibly even betrayed by those who sent her, how can Jasmine possibly fight back against a system designed to crush anyone who challenges it? After 2 weeks in solitary confinement with minimal human contact, Jasmine was surprised when guards informed her she would be returned to general population. The sudden change worried her. Nothing in Westwood County happened without Judge Thornton's approval, which meant this was part of some strategy she didn't yet understand. Back in the cell block, Jasmine found the dynamics had shifted. Inmates gave her a wide berth except for one, a young woman named Vanessa, who approached Jasmine during mealtime. "Heard you're taking on Thornton," Vanessa said quietly. "My brother got 10 years for something he didn't do. Judge didn't even look at the evidence." Over the next few days, Vanessa became Jasmine's only ally among the inmates. She shared information about guard rotations, which staff members might be sympathetic, and, most importantly, offered to help Jasmine document her experiences since all her previous evidence had been confiscated. "My cousin works in the laundry," Vanessa explained. "We can hide notes in the seams of your clothes. They don't search laundry workers as carefully." Jasmine was hesitant to trust anyone after everything that had happened, but without resources or outside contact, she had few options. She began carefully documenting names, dates, and overheard conversations on small scraps of paper that Vanessa collected and promised to pass along to her cousin. Meanwhile, Jasmine's case continued to progress through the system. Her new court-appointed attorney, a different man named Douglas Harper, seemed more competent than Richards, but made it clear he wouldn't challenge Judge Thornton directly. "The evidence against you is substantial," Harper explained during a consultation. "The prosecution has added witness testimony claiming they saw you selling pills near the high school before your arrest." "That's impossible," Jasmine protested. "I was never near the high school." "These witnesses have signed affidavits. They're very credible. An elementary school teacher and a local business owner." Jasmine realized they were fabricating an entire case against her, complete with false witnesses. The system wasn't just biased. It was actively manufacturing justice to protect itself. 3 days before her preliminary hearing, Jasmine received unexpected news. Taylor Washington had filed an emergency motion with the state Supreme Court challenging her disbarment and requesting to be reinstated as Jasmine's counsel. It was the first positive development in weeks. That same evening, Vanessa slipped Jasmine a note during recreation period. "My cousin got your notes out. Contacted someone named Marcus Johnson at the DOJ." Jasmine felt a surge of hope. Marcus was her supervisor, the one who had assigned her to this undercover operation. If he knew what was happening, surely the DOJ would intervene. The next morning, guards arrived at Jasmine's cell before dawn. "Cell search," they announced, forcing her to stand in the corridor while they tore apart her small living space. "Well, what do we have here?" one guard said triumphantly, pulling out a sharpened piece of metal from beneath her mattress. "Contraband weapon. That's a serious offense." "That's not mine," Jasmine protested. "It was planted." The guards ignored her protests as they continued searching, eventually finding several pills similar to the ones she had allegedly been arrested for selling, hidden in her toilet tank. "Looks like someone's been dealing inside too," the second guard remarked with a smirk. "Judge Thornton will be very interested to hear about this." As Jasmine was handcuffed and led to administrative segregation for the new charges, she caught sight of Vanessa watching from her cell, not with concern but with satisfaction. With sickening clarity, Jasmine realized she'd been betrayed. Vanessa wasn't an ally, but a plant, someone working for the administration to gather information. Hand set Jasmine up for additional charges. In the isolation cell, Jasmine tried to process this new betrayal. Had any of her notes actually been sent out, or had they gone straight to Judge Thornton? Had Vanessa's mention of contacting Marcus Johnson been true, or just part of the deception to give Jasmine false hope? Her questions were answered 2 days later when Warden Blackwell visited her in isolation. "Your preliminary hearing has been postponed," he informed her with poorly concealed satisfaction. "New charges require new proceedings, but I thought you might want to see this." He slid a newspaper through the slot in her door. A small article noted that Taylor Washington's appeal had been denied, and she now faced additional ethics investigations. The article also mentioned that a federal employee named Marcus Johnson had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into improper use of resources. "Your friends on the outside aren't faring well," Blackwell commented. "Seems like supporting you has become hazardous to one's career." Jasmine maintained her composure until the warden left, then sank onto her bunk, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her. They had neutralized Taylor Washington again, and now targeted Marcus. Her notes had clearly gone straight to Thornton, who used them to identify and attack her remaining connections. The isolation cell felt smaller than ever as Jasmine faced the reality of her position. Every avenue of support had been cut off. Every potential ally had been neutralized or turned against her. Evidence had been planted, witnesses fabricated, and now additional charges would keep her in the system even longer. That night, unable to sleep, Jasmine heard a guard approach her cell. Through the small window in the door appeared the face of Judge Thornton. "I thought you should know," he said quietly. "The journalist who was asking questions about Sentinel, Mr. Chen. He was involved in a serious car accident this evening. Brake failure, apparently. He's in intensive care." The implied threat hung in the air between them. "You can't silence everyone," Jasmine said with more confidence than she felt. "I don't need to silence everyone," Thornton replied calmly. "Just enough to maintain the status quo. The system is bigger than any individual, Miss Wilson Reynolds. Yes, we know your real name now. Your DOJ credentials have been compromised." As Thornton walked away, Jasmine faced the terrifying possibility that the judge was right. The system was designed to protect itself. For every person willing to speak out, there were mechanisms in place to silence, discredit, or intimidate them into compliance. Her mission had failed. Her identity was exposed. Her support network had been systematically dismantled, and now people who tried to help her were being physically harmed. For the first time since arriving in Westwood County, Jasmine considered giving up, taking whatever plea deal they offered to protect herself and others from further retaliation. The preliminary hearing for Jasmine's case had all the trappings of justice without any of its substance. The courtroom was full. The proceedings followed proper protocol, and yet the outcome felt predetermined from the moment Judge Thornton took the bench. Seated beside her court-appointed attorney, Douglas Harper, Jasmine watched as the prosecutor presented the case against her. District Attorney Rebecca Lawson had clearly prepared meticulously, presenting evidence bags containing the pills allegedly found in Jasmine's motel room, testimony from the arresting officers, and signed statements from the supposedly credible witnesses who claimed to have seen Jasmine selling drugs near the high school. "Your Honor," Lawson concluded with practiced gravity, "the evidence clearly establishes probable cause that the defendant was engaged in the distribution of controlled substances, a serious felony that threatens the safety of our community's children." Harper's defense was perfunctory at best. He raised mild objections to the search procedure, but didn't challenge the witnesses or question the convenient timing of Jasmine's arrest immediately after her courtroom victory. When Jasmine passed him notes with specific legal arguments to make, he ignored them. "Mr. Harper," Judge Thornton asked with exaggerated patience, "does your client wish to testify on her own behalf?" Before Harper could respond, Jasmine stood. "Yes, Your Honor, I do." Taking the stand against her attorney's whispered advice, Jasmine tried to present her side of the story, explaining how her arrest came suspiciously after she had challenged the court, how evidence had been planted, and how she had been systematically isolated from legal support. Judge Thornton allowed her to speak, but watched with barely concealed amusement. The court reporter dutifully recorded her testimony, but Jasmine could tell from the expressions of those in the courtroom that few believed her. The narrative against her had been too carefully constructed. When she mentioned the financial connections there between Judge Thornton and Sentinel Youth Services, the judge finally interrupted. "Miss Wilson, these allegations are serious and completely unfounded. One more such accusation, and I'll hold you in contempt." The local media, once interested in her case, now portrayed her as a troubled teen spinning conspiracy theories to avoid punishment. One newspaper quoted sources close to the investigation, describing Jasmine as having delusions of persecution and a history of making false accusations. Outside the courthouse, a small group of protesters from Lincoln Heights had gathered to support her, but they were vastly outnumbered by community members expressing concern about drug dealers targeting our schools. Jasmine recognized several of these concerned citizens as court employees and police officers' family members. The protest against her had been orchestrated. In the days following the hearing, things deteriorated further. Jasmine's parents, who had been unaware of her undercover assignment, received an anonymous package containing photos of their daughter in custody, along with fabricated records suggesting she had a history of mental health issues and making false allegations. The accompanying note advised them to control your daughter before she hurts herself or others with these delusions. This targeting of her family marked a new low. When Harper informed her of this development during a legal visit, Jasmine felt physically ill. "They're trying to isolate you completely," Harper explained, showing uncharacteristic sympathy. "Even from your family. Can you get a message to my parents? Tell them I'm okay and to be careful." Harper shook his head. "I tried calling them. Their number has been disconnected. According to my contact, they've been experiencing harassment at work. Your father's supervisor suggested he take a leave of absence." The systematic dismantling of Jasmine's support network was nearly complete. Her DOJ handler was unreachable, her attorney disbarred, her journalist ally hospitalized, and now her family was being pressured and isolated as well. The final blow came the day before her formal arraignment. A key witness Jasmine had been counting on, a former detention center employee who had agreed to testify about the financial relationship between Judge Thornton and Sentinel, contacted Harper to withdraw his testimony. He was explicit about why, Harper told Jasmine quietly. Two men visited his home at night. They mentioned his children by name, what schools they attended, and their daily routines. He got the message. In court the next day, Judge Thornton was the picture of judicial propriety, as he formally arraigned Jasmine on charges that now included drug distribution, possession of contraband in a correctional facility, and filing false reports. The last charge stemming from her accusations against the court. As the proceedings concluded, Judge Thornton asked if Jasmine understood the charges against her. "I understand exactly what's happening here," she replied, exhaustion evident in her voice. The judge smiled slightly. "For the record, the defendant acknowledges understanding of the charges. Bail continues to be denied due to the additional charges and flight risk. Next case." As guards led her from the courtroom, Judge Thornton gestured for her to pause near the bench, out of earshot of others. "People like you always lose against the system, Miss Wilson Reynolds," he said softly, using her real name. "This courthouse has stood for over 100 years. Judges like me have maintained order for generations. Activists, reformers, idealists. They all eventually learn that the system is stronger than any individual." For the first time, Jasmine had no retort. The evidence against her was overwhelming, even if fabricated. Her support system had been methodically destroyed. The corruption she'd come to expose was far more extensive and deeply rooted than anyone at the DOJ had anticipated. Back in her cell that evening, Jasmine faced the darkest moment of her mission. Everything she had tried had failed. Everyone who had tried to help her had been harmed or silenced. The next day, Harper would present her with a plea deal offer, admit guilt to lesser charges in exchange for a 5-year sentence instead of the 20 years she potentially faced if convicted. At trial, the system was designed to break people into compliance, and Jasmine had to acknowledge it was working. The rational choice seemed clear. Take the deal, protect her family from further harassment, and hope that in 5 years she could resume her life and career, perhaps finding another way to fight for justice. As she considered this option, staring at the blank wall of her cell, Jasmine thought of her brother Darius, who had maintained his innocence despite pressure to accept a plea. She thought of the teens in juvenile detention who had no Harvard law degree, no DOJ credentials, no understanding of how systematically the odds were stacked against them. If she gave up now, what message would that send? That the system always wins. That justice was just an illusion for certain communities. The thought kept her awake long into the night, wrestling with the most difficult decision of her young career. Fight a battle that seemed impossible to win, or surrender to protect herself and those she cared about. Do you think there comes a point when fighting a corrupt system becomes futile, or should people never give up no matter the personal cost? Comment number 1 if you believe some battles cannot be won against entrenched power, or comment number 2 if you think persistent resistance is the only way to create change. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the fight for justice in America. What hidden ally could possibly emerge to help Jasmine now? when everyone who's tried to assist her has been silenced or neutralized. The morning after her arraignment, Jasmine was escorted to the visitation room to meet with Harper about the plea deal. Instead of her attorney, however, she found herself facing a middle-aged woman she didn't recognize. "My name is Gloria Ramirez," the woman said quietly once the guard had stepped outside. "I'm a clerk at the courthouse. We don't have much time." Jasmine regarded the woman suspiciously. After Vanessa's betrayal, she wasn't eager to trust another unexpected ally. Reading her expression, Gloria pushed a small envelope across the table. "Your attorney will be here in 20 minutes. I told the guards I needed to have you sign some paperwork before your legal visit." Jasmine cautiously opened the envelope. Inside was an employee ID card for Westwood County Courthouse with Gloria's photo, along with several folded pages of what appeared to be financial records. "I've been documenting everything for 3 years," Gloria explained in a hushed voice. "Judge Thornton, Warden Blackwell, D.A. Lawson, they're all part of it. I started noticing patterns in case assignments and sentencing, Black and Hispanic. Defendants consistently received harsher sentences, but it wasn't just racism. There was a financial incentive." "Sentinel Youth Services," Jasmine whispered. Gloria nodded. "And Adult Correctional Management, the company that runs the county jail. Same parent company, different subsidiaries. Judge Thornton and several other officials hold investments through shell companies. I've been collecting evidence, but I didn't know what to do with it until I heard about you." "How did you know who I am?" "I process all the documents in Thornton's courtroom. When they ran your fingerprints after the second arrest, I saw the report that came back flagged as restricted federal." Gloria leaned forward. "I have access to the courthouse computer system. I can get you copies of records showing the financial connections." For the first time in weeks, Jasmine felt a flicker of hope. "Can you get these records to the State Attorney General's office? Or the FBI?" Gloria shook her head. "I tried contacting federal authorities 6 months ago. Nothing happened. I think someone intercepted my complaint. That's why I need your help. You know the right people to contact. People who won't be compromised." "My handler at the DOJ has gone silent," Jasmine admitted. "Judge Thornton implied that higher-ups might be involved." "That's possible," Gloria acknowledged. "But there's something else you should know. You're not the first person to investigate Westwood County. There have been others, from various agencies, even journalists. Most gave up when faced with resistance. Some took payoffs to look the other way. What happened to those who didn't? Give up or take the money?" Gloria's expression darkened. "There have been accidents, career-ending scandals. One investigator from the state had a mental breakdown. At least that's the official story. This explained why the corruption had persisted for so long despite being so blatant. Anyone who got close to exposing it was either co-opted or neutralized." "Why are you risking this to help me?" Jasmine asked. "My nephew was sentenced by Thornton, 17 years old, first offense, non-violent, 3 years in juvenile detention that destroyed him. He took his own life 6 months after release." Gloria's voice cracked slightly. "When I saw another young person standing up to Thornton, I couldn't stay silent anymore." The sound of approaching footsteps cut their conversation short. Gloria quickly gathered her official-looking papers. "I can access the courthouse computers tonight. There's a routine system backup at midnight. The administrator password hasn't been changed in years," she whispered. "I'll download everything I can find, financial records, emails, sentencing patterns." "That's extremely risky," Jasmine warned. "Sometimes the only way to fight the system is from within," Gloria replied. As she stood to leave, "I'll get the information to your attorney tomorrow." After Gloria left, Harper arrived with the plea offer, unaware of the preceding conversation. As he outlined the terms, 5 years with possibility of parole after 3 in exchange for guilty pleas on reduced charges, Jasmine listened with renewed determination. "I need more time to consider this," she told Harper, who seemed surprised by her reluctance given the overwhelming evidence against her. That night, Jasmine barely slept, wondering if Gloria would succeed or if she'd be caught accessing the restricted court records. The clerk was risking not just her job, but potentially criminal charges to help expose the corruption. The next morning, Harper returned with unexpected news. "Something strange is happening with your case," he reported, looking genuinely perplexed. "The prosecution has requested a 48-hour continuance, citing evidentiary review." Judge Thornton seemed upset about it. This suggested Gloria had succeeded in accessing the records, causing enough disruption that the prosecution needed time to assess the damage. 2 days later, Harper returned with a thick manila envelope. "A court clerk asked me to give you this," he said, clearly curious but maintaining attorney-client privilege. "She said it was important case documentation you requested." Inside the envelope, Jasmine found a flash drive and a handwritten note. Courthouse computer system contained everything. Dozens of teens sentenced under same scheme. Recorded conversations in judges' chambers. "Be careful, CR." The initials. Confused Jasmine, until she realized Gloria had used her real initials rather than the name she had provided, likely for security reasons. Harper allowed Jasmine to use his laptop to view the contents of the drive. What they found was astonishing. Spreadsheets tracking detention rates against quarterly investment returns, emails between Judge Thornton and Sentinel executives discussing population targets, and most damning of all, audio recordings from the judge's chambers, where he explicitly discussed sentencing decisions based on facility occupancy needs. "My God," Harper whispered, his professional detachment finally cracking. "This goes beyond discrimination. This is criminal conspiracy." The evidence was overwhelming, but Jasmine now faced a crucial question: how to use it safely when previous attempts to expose the corruption had been thwarted. "We need to make copies," she instructed Harper. "Multiple copies stored in different locations, and I need to get back into that courtroom as soon as possible." As Harper left with the drive. To make secure copies, Jasmine felt genuine hope for the first time since her arrest. The tide was turning, but she knew the most dangerous phase was still ahead. Judge Thornton and his allies wouldn't surrender their power and profits without a fight. That evening, as Jasmine was planning her courtroom strategy, a guard informed her that Gloria Ramirez had not reported for work that day. Her apartment showed signs of hasty departure, with neighbors reporting seeing her leave with a suitcase late the previous night. Whether Gloria had fled for safety or been disappeared by Thornton's allies remained unclear, but her sacrifice had provided Jasmine with the ammunition needed to expose the entire operation. Now Jasmine needed to ensure the clerk's bravery wasn't in vain. Using Harper's legal pad, she began drafting a detailed plan for her next court appearance, one that would catch Judge Thornton completely off guard and finally bring the corruption into the light. The day of Jasmine's hearing arrived with tension hanging in the air. The prosecution had been unusually quiet since receiving the continuance, and Judge Thornton had scheduled this hearing specifically, overriding normal court procedures to expedite Jasmine's case. District Attorney Lawson entered the courtroom looking uncharacteristically tense, flanked by 2 assistant prosecutors who carried multiple binders of materials. Judge Thornton took the bench with his usual air of authority, but Jasmine noticed a tightness around his eyes, a barely perceptible nervousness that hadn't been there before. Harper had done exactly as Jasmine instructed, making multiple copies of Gloria's evidence and delivering them to specific individuals with instructions to release the information if anything happened to either of them. He had also, at Jasmine's request, filed several unusual motions that had clearly confused the prosecution. Motion to introduce newly discovered evidence related to jurisdictional challenges, Lawson read from Harper's filing, frowning. Motion to question the court's impartiality based on financial disclosure requirements. What exactly is the defense's strategy here, Mr. Harper? Harper, following Jasmine's script, replied simply, "The defense believes these issues are fundamental to the proceedings, Your Honor." Judge Thornton studied Jasmine with thinly veiled suspicion. "Miss Wilson seems to be directing your unusual legal strategy, Counselor. Perhaps she would like to explain these motions herself." This was exactly the opening Jasmine had hoped for. She stood, adopting the demeanor of a defeated defendant. "Your Honor, if I may address the court," Thornton nodded, clearly expecting an admission of guilt, or perhaps another conspiracy accusation he could dismiss. "Your Honor," The defense would like to challenge the evidence presented by the prosecution on procedural grounds, Jasmine began, deliberately using legal terminology that seemed beyond what a typical teenager would know. She noticed several spectators in the courtroom taking particular interest, including two men in suits who hadn't been present at previous hearings. Methodically, Jasmine began questioning the chain of custody for the drug evidence, citing specific protocols that hadn't been followed according to the police reports. She referenced case law that even Harper looked surprised to hear her cite. Judge Thornton's expression darkened as Jasmine continued her legal arguments. D.A. Lawson appeared increasingly uncomfortable, shuffling papers and whispering to her assistants. Furthermore, Jasmine continued confidently, the defense moves to suppress the witness statements on the grounds that they constitute hearsay under the Crawford standard, as established in Crawford v. Washington. The defense has not been afforded the opportunity to cross-examine these supposed eyewitnesses. "Miss Wilson," Judge Thornton interrupted, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, "your knowledge of legal precedent is unusual for someone your age. Perhaps you would care to explain to the court exactly how you came to be so well-versed in federal evidence standards?" This was the moment Jasmine had been waiting for. She had deliberately led the judge to this question, baiting him to challenge her knowledge publicly. "I studied, Your Honor," she replied innocently. "The public library has extensive legal resources. Would the court prefer that defendants remain ignorant of their rights?" Several spectators murmured in approval. Jasmine noticed one of the suited men in the back writing something in a small notebook. Thornton's face flushed. "Your sudden expertise seems convenient, Miss Wilson. One might almost think you had professional legal training." "Is the court suggesting there's something suspicious about a black defendant educating herself about the legal system?" Jasmine asked, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. "Perhaps Your Honor finds it unusual when certain types of defendants can cite the law effectively." The trap was set. Judge Thornton, visibly angry now, took the bait. "What I find unusual, Miss Wilson, is a supposed high school dropout suddenly speaking like a law professor. What I find suspicious is your continued insinuations about this court's impartiality without a shred of evidence to support your claims." "Would the court accept evidence if it were presented?" Jasmine asked calmly. "This is not the proper procedural context for—" "Your Honor," Jasmine interrupted, something no defendant would typically dare. "Would the court accept documentary evidence showing that you have a direct financial interest in the detention facilities to which you sentence an abnormally high number of minority defendants?" The courtroom fell completely silent. Judge Thornton stared at Jasmine, momentarily speechless, before regaining his composure. "These outrageous accusations are contempt of court," he declared, banging his gavel. "Bailiff, remove the defendant immediately." Before the bailiff could reach her, Jasmine spoke again, her voice clear and authoritative. "Your Honor, before I'm removed, I'd like to alert the court that among today's observers are two FBI agents who have been provided with complete documentation of the financial relationship between Your Honor, District Attorney Lawson, and Sentinel, Youth Services through Westwood Holdings, LLC. All eyes turned to the back of the courtroom, where the two suited men now stood, their expressions impassive. "This is absurd," Judge Thornton sputtered, but Jasmine could see the flash of fear in his eyes. "These proceedings are adjourned until—" "Additionally," Jasmine continued relentlessly, "copies of emails discussing population targets for the detention facilities and audio recordings from Your Honor's chambers have been delivered to the State Attorney General's office and several national news organizations." Day Lawson was now frantically whispering to her assistants, while Judge Thornton's face had gone from red to ashen. "Who are you?" he demanded, forgetting court protocol in his shock. The courtroom doors opened, and several more agents entered, followed by a man Jasmine recognized with relief, Marcus Johnson, her DOJ supervisor. "Your Honor," Jasmine said, straightening to her full height, "my name is Jasmine Wilson Reynolds. I am a Department of Justice attorney conducting an authorized undercover investigation into systematic discrimination and corruption in the Westwood County judicial system." Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the courtroom. Judge Thornton stared at Jasmine, his authority visibly crumbling as FBI agents moved toward the bench. "This court is adjourned," Thornton declared desperately, rising. To leave, but an FBI agent was already standing by the judge's exit. "Maxwell Thornton," the agent announced formally. "The FBI has a warrant for your arrest on charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. You have the right to remain silent." As the reality of what was happening sunk in, chaos erupted in the courtroom. D.A. Lawson was surrounded by agents, court officers stood frozen in confusion, and reporters who had been tipped off about a potential development in the case frantically took notes and photos. Amidst the commotion, Marcus Johnson reached Jasmine's side. "I'm sorry we couldn't contact you," he said urgently. "Once we realized how deep this went, we had to go completely dark. Your messages got through, but we couldn't risk compromising the larger investigation." "Larger investigation?" Jasmine asked, still processing the dramatic turn of events. Thornton was right about one thing. This did reach federal levels, but not in the way he thought. "We've been building a RICO case against the entire private detention network for 18 months. Your evidence was the final piece we needed." As reporters pressed forward trying to get statements, Jasmine noticed Judge Thornton being escorted from the courtroom in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. Their eyes met briefly across the room. The powerful judge who had terrorized defendants for years now facing justice himself. The system that had seemed unbeatable just days before was crumbling before her eyes. But as Jasmine watched Thornton being led away, she noticed him exchange a significant glance with someone at the back of the courtroom, someone who wasn't being arrested, who slipped quietly out the side door as the focus remained on the E. "Judge." Jasmine realized then that while this was a significant victory, it likely wasn't the end of the story. The corruption might extend beyond even what they had uncovered so far. As FBI agents secured the courtroom and began processing the arrests of Judge Thornton, District Attorney Lawson, and several court officers, Marcus Johnson led Jasmine to a private conference room where she could finally remove the persona of the teenage defendant she had maintained for weeks. "You've been through hell," Marcus acknowledged, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "But what you've uncovered is bigger than any of us anticipated." Jasmine was still processing the dramatic turn of events. "I thought I'd been abandoned. Thornton said someone at DOJ had compromised the investigation." "That wasn't entirely untrue," Marcus admitted. "When your first coded message reached us about Sentinel Youth Services, it triggered some unusual reactions. Certain officials tried to shut down your investigation, claiming jurisdictional issues. That's when we realized the corruption might extend to federal levels. So you went dark." Marcus nodded. "We had to bypass normal channels. I coordinated directly with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Your evidence gave us probable cause for warrants we'd been trying to get for months." A knock at the door interrupted them. An FBI agent entered with a tablet. "Ms. Wilson Reynolds, we need your formal statement, but first, I thought you should see this. The media is already running with the story." The tablet showed a breaking news broadcast. "Breaking: FBI raids Westwood County Courthouse, arrests judge and district attorney in corruption probe." Watching the footage, Jasmine felt a surreal sense of vindication. The system that had seemed so insurmountable was now being exposed on national television. "We should get you back to Washington," Marcus said. "The Attorney General wants to meet with you personally to discuss the case." "Not yet," Jasmine replied firmly. "I need to finish what I started. I want to be present when Thornton is formally charged." Marcus looked like he might object, but then nodded in understanding. "The formal arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning, but there's something else you should know. Thornton isn't the top of this pyramid." Before he could elaborate, another FBI agent burst into the room. "Sir, Judge Thornton is demanding to speak with his attorney before processing. He's becoming combative." "I'll handle it," Marcus said, rising. "Jasmine, stay here with Agent Chen. We'll continue this conversation shortly." Left alone with the FBI agent, Jasmine took the opportunity to ask about Gloria Ramirez, the court clerk who had provided the crucial evidence. "We have her in protective custody," Agent Chen confirmed. "She reached out to us the same night she accessed the court records. Smart woman, she created multiple backups of everything." Relieved that Gloria was safe, Jasmine was preparing to give her formal statement when shouting erupted from the hallway. Before Agent Chen could react, the door burst open, and Judge Thornton himself stood there, somehow free of his handcuffs, a court officer's gun gripped in his trembling hand. "You," he snarled at Jasmine, his face contorted with rage. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Agent Chen reached for his weapon, but Thornton waved the gun wildly. "Don't. I have nothing to lose now." "Judge Thornton," Jasmine said calmly, standing slowly, "whatever you're thinking of doing will only make things worse for you." "Worse?" Thornton laughed bitterly. "My career is over, my reputation is destroyed, but I'm not going down alone." Commotion in the hallway suggested agents were positioning themselves outside, but Thornton had backed into a corner, using a desk as partial cover, the gun still trained on Jasmine. "You were just the bait," Thornton spat. "They used you to get to me, but they don't care about justice any more than I do. They're just eliminating competition." "What are you talking about?" Jasmine asked, trying to keep him talking until help arrived. "Sentinel isn't just some county-level operation," Thornton snarled. "It's part of a national network. Judges, prosecutors, politicians, all profiting from America's addiction to incarceration. They're letting you expose me because I got greedy, wanted a bigger cut. But the real powers behind this will never face justice." Before Jasmine could respond, Marcus Johnson appeared in the doorway, his own weapon drawn. "It's over, Thornton. Put the gun down." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Thornton swung the gun toward Marcus. Agents shouted warnings, and Jasmine instinctively lunged toward the judge, knocking his arm upward as the weapon discharged. The bullet hit the ceiling as multiple agents rushed in, subduing Thornton and securing the weapon. As agents handcuffed Thornton and led him away, he locked eyes with Jasmine one last time. "Ask your boss about AmeriCorps Holdings," he said, just loud enough for her to hear. "Ask him who really owns the private prison industry in this country." The chaos subsided as quickly as it had erupted. Marcus approached Jasmine, concern evident on his face. "Are you all right? That was incredibly brave and reckless." "What's AmeriCorps Holdings?" Jasmine asked directly. Marcus's expression changed, subtly, just a momentary flicker that most would miss, but Jasmine had spent her career reading people. "A corporate entity not relevant to this case," he replied smoothly. "Thornton is desperate, trying to create confusion." But Jasmine knew deflection when she heard it. "Is Thornton telling the truth? Is Sentinel part of something bigger?" Marcus sighed, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "This isn't the place for that conversation. What matters is, we've taken down a major corruption ring. Dozens of wrongfully sentenced individuals will see justice." His evasion confirmed Jasmine's suspicions. The case might be larger than even the FBI was willing to tackle, at least publicly. As they left the conference room, Jasmine spotted a familiar face. Taylor Washington, her disbarred attorney, was being escorted into the courthouse by FBI agents. "You're bringing her in as a witness?" Jasmine asked. "Better," Marcus replied with a small smile. "The State Bar Association has already issued an emergency reinstatement of her license. The ethics charges were obviously fabricated by Thornton's allies." Across the lobby, the journalist Michael Chen was also present, his arm in a sling, but otherwise appearing recovered from his accident. He gave Jasmine a respectful nod. "We've been coordinating with Mr. Chen for the past week," Marcus explained. "His editor was pressured to fire him, but once we explained the situation, they were eager to help expose the story." One by one, the allies who had been neutralized were reappearing, their reputations restored. It was a powerful reminder that, while systems could be corrupted, individuals with integrity could still prevail when they worked together. That evening, as Jasmine prepared for the next day's formal proceedings, she couldn't shake Thornton's warning about AmeriCorps Holdings. Using a secure computer provided by the FBI, she conducted her own research and discovered troubling connections between this seemingly innocuous corporate entity and dozens of private detention facilities across the country. The company's board included former federal judges, high-ranking political appointees, and powerful business figures. The corruption in Westwood County wasn't an isolated case. It was potentially just one node in a nationwide network turning the punishment of human beings, disproportionately people of color, into profit. The next morning, Jasmine entered the federal courthouse, where Judge Thornton would face arraignment on multiple felony charges. The halls were packed with media, activists, and curious citizens, drawn by the explosive story. As proceedings began, Jasmine sat in the front row beside Marcus, watching as the once powerful judge was led in wearing handcuffs and a prisoner's jumpsuit, a stark reversal of fortune for a man who had terrorized defendants from the bench for years. The federal judge presiding over the case read the extensive charges: racketeering, conspiracy, civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and more. When asked how he pled, Thornton's response shocked the courtroom. "Guilty," he stated clearly, "but I request consideration for cooperation with broader investigations." The prosecutor and defense attorney approached the bench for a whispered conference, which concluded with the judge announcing, "The court will consider the defendant's cooperation during sentencing." For now, the defendant is remanded without bail. As Thornton was led away, he caught Jasmine's eye once more. His expression wasn't the hatred she expected, but something more complex, a grudging acknowledgement that she had outplayed him, combined with a challenge that seemed to say, "This isn't over." Following the arraignment, Jasmine was swarmed by reporters requesting statements. With Marcus's approval, she gave a brief comment. "Today's proceedings are just the beginning of restoring justice to Westwood County. Dozens of cases will need to be reviewed, and many wrongfully sentenced individuals deserve immediate relief. This case demonstrates that no one is above the law, not even those entrusted to enforce it." As cameras flashed and reporters shouted follow-up questions, Jasmine noticed a distinguished older man watching from the periphery. Marcus followed her gaze and whispered, "That's Attorney General Richardson. He flew in specifically for this case." The nation's top law enforcement official gestured for them to join him in a nearby conference room, away from the media frenzy. Once inside, with the door securely closed, he extended his hand to Jasmine. "Ms. Wilson Reynolds, your work on this case has been extraordinary. The Department of Justice is proud to have attorneys of your caliber and courage." "Thank you, sir," Jasmine replied. "But I believe this case extends beyond Westwood County." Judge Thornton mentioned connections to a company called AmeriCorps Holdings that seems to have its fingers in private detention facilities nationwide. The Attorney General and Marcus exchanged glances before Richardson responded carefully. "We are aware of certain concerning patterns in the privatized detention industry. Judge Thornton's cooperation may prove valuable in that regard." "Will there be a larger investigation?" Jasmine pressed. "That remains to be seen," Richardson replied diplomatically. "These matters involve powerful interests and require strategic consideration." The political evasion was clear. They knew about the bigger picture, but were hesitant to commit to pursuing it, at least publicly. As the conversation concluded, Richardson had one more surprise. "Ms. Wilson Reynolds, I'd like to offer you a position with our Civil Rights Division's Special Litigation Section. Your experience and determination would be invaluable in addressing systemic discrimination in justice systems nationwide." It was a prestigious offer, exactly the kind of role Jasmine had dreamed of when entering law school. Yet, as she considered it, she couldn't help wondering if working within the system would enable her to create real change, or if she would eventually face the same institutional resistance that seemed to be tempering the Attorney General's response to the larger corruption network. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted outside. The door burst open to reveal an FBI agent, his expression urgent. "Sir, there's been a situation at the detention center. Judge Thornton has been found unresponsive in his cell." 3 months after the dramatic events in Westwood County, Jasmine Wilson Reynolds sat before the House Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C., prepared to deliver testimony that would send shockwaves through the nation's criminal justice system. The hearing room was packed with media, advocacy groups, and citizens drawn by the explosive revelations that had emerged following Judge Thornton's death, officially ruled a suicide, though questions remained about the convenient timing and the missing surveillance footage from his cell. "Ms. Wilson Reynolds," began Congresswoman Eleanor Martinez, chair of the committee, "please state your current position for the record." "I am the Special Counsel for Detention Reform at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division," Jasmine replied clearly, her voice carrying through the chamber. Following Judge Thornton's death, Jasmine had accepted Attorney General Richardson's job offer, but with a significant modification. Rather than joining the existing bureaucracy, she had negotiated the creation of a special counsel position focused specifically on investigating corruption in privatized detention systems nationwide, starting with AmeriCorps Holdings. Please summarize the findings of your investigation into judicial corruption in Westwood County and its connections to private detention facilities, Congresswoman Martinez requested. Jasmine took a deep breath. Our investigation revealed a criminal enterprise operating under the guise of a legitimate judicial system. Judge Maxwell Thornton, in collusion with District Attorney Rebecca Lawson and numerous other officials, systematically discriminated against racial minorities, particularly in juvenile cases, to maintain high occupancy rates in privately operated detention facilities. She continued methodically, outlining how the conspiracy had functioned. Black and Hispanic defendants received sentences averaging 340% longer than white counterparts for identical offenses. Excessive bail was routinely set to ensure pre-trial detention. Public defenders were pressured to push plea deals rather than mount meaningful defenses. The financial incentive behind this discrimination was clear, Jasmine explained. Through shell companies and investment vehicles, Judge Thornton and his co-conspirators held significant financial stakes in Sentinel Youth Services and adult correctional management, receiving quarterly dividends tied directly to facility occupancy rates. As Jasmine detailed the evidence, financial records, email exchanges, recorded conversations, and testimony from cooperating witnesses, the scope of the corruption became undeniable. 53 officials had now been indicted across multiple jurisdictions, including police officers, prosecutors, probation officers, and 3 additional judges. Most significantly, Jasmine concluded this portion of her testimony, our investigation revealed that Westwood County was not an isolated case. Similar patterns have been identified in 17 counties across 6 states, all connected through a corporate entity called AmeriCorps Holdings. A murmur ran through the hearing room. This was the first public confirmation that the DOJ was investigating the larger network Thornton had mentioned in his final moments. And what has happened to the individuals wrongfully incarcerated through this corrupt system? Asked Congressman James Williams. To date, 274 cases have been reopened, resulting in 162 immediate releases and 112 sentence reductions, Jasmine reported. This includes my brother, Darius Reynolds, who served 5 years for a crime he did not commit and was finally exonerated last month based on evidence that Judge Thornton had deliberately suppressed. This personal connection, which Jasmine had not previously disclosed publicly, caused another stir in the chamber. Her motivation for pursuing justice now became even clearer to those watching. As the hearing continued, Jasmine faced pointed questions about how such corruption could flourish, unchecked for so long. Her answers were unflinching in their assessment of systemic failures, including inadequate oversight of privatized detention facilities, insufficient resources for public defenders, and a culture of deference to judicial authority that discouraged questioning obvious disparities. The most powerful moment came when Congresswoman Martinez asked about the human impact of the corruption. Behind every statistic is a human being whose life was derailed by this discrimination, Jasmine replied, her voice catching slightly. Children separated from families, education interrupted, employment opportunities lost, psychological trauma inflicted, all to increase profit margins for private detention companies and their investors. After 4 hours of testimony as the hearing concluded, Jasmine delivered a final statement that resonated far beyond the committee room. The corruption we uncovered in Westwood County is not an anomaly, but a warning. When we commodify justice, when we turn punishment into a profit center, we create incentives for the very discrimination our legal system is supposed to prevent. True reform requires not just prosecuting individual bad actors, but reimagining a system that measures success by justice served, not cells filled. In the months that followed, Jasmine's work expanded beyond prosecution to systemic reform. The Westwood model, as the media dubbed it, became a template for investigating judicial corruption nationwide. Federal legislation was introduced, requiring stringent oversight of privatized detention facilities and eliminating financial incentives tied to incarceration rates. Jasmine regularly visited detention facilities, interviewing incarcerated individuals whose cases might have been tainted by discrimination. During one such visit to a juvenile facility in neighboring Grant County, she met with a group of young detainees to explain their rights and the review process. "The system tried to convince us we deserve this," said one 15-year-old boy, his expression a mixture of anger and hope. That this was justice. "Justice isn't just about punishment," Jasmine told him. "It's about fairness, rehabilitation, and recognizing the humanity in every person who enters a courtroom. What happened to you wasn't justice, but we're working to fix that." Later that day, as Jasmine reviewed case files in her office, Marcus Johnson stopped by with news. "The AmeriCorps investigation just reached the federal level," he reported. "2 former Justice Department officials and a federal judge have been implicated in the scheme. The Attorney General has approved expanding your task force." Jasmine nodded, thinking of Judge Thornton's final words about real powers that would never face justice. Perhaps he had underestimated the momentum for accountability that his own case had triggered. "There's something else," Marcus added, sliding a newspaper across her desk. "Thought you'd want to see this." The article described how Taylor Washington, now fully reinstated as an attorney, had established a legal clinic in Westwood County specifically focused on appealing cases, handled by Judge Thornton. Michael Chen had won a National Journalism Award for his coverage of the corruption scandal. Gloria Ramirez, the court clerk whose bravery had provided crucial evidence, had been appointed to a state commission on judicial ethics. The seeds of change Jasmine had planted were growing in unexpected ways, as others found courage to continue the work of reform. The final paragraph of the article quoted an anonymous source familiar with ongoing federal investigations. "What began in Westwood County has revealed connections to detention facilities in at least 20 states. This may be the largest corruption case in American judicial history, with potentially billions of dollars improperly diverted through the privatized detention industry." As Jasmine placed the article in her growing file of evidence, she reflected on how far the case had come from her first day in Judge Thornton's courtroom, posing as a 16-year-old defendant. The system that had seemed so impenetrable then was gradually being reformed through the collective efforts of courageous individuals willing to stand against injustice. Yet she also recognized that their work was far from complete. For every corrupt judge exposed, countless others remained unaccountable. For every wrongfully sentenced person freed, thousands more still languished in detention without adequate representation or review. True systemic change would require sustained effort beyond any single case or investigation, a commitment to reimagining justice itself, not just punishing those who perverted it. As evening fell over Washington, D.C., Jasmine closed her office and headed to a community center in a predominantly black neighborhood where she had volunteered to speak with local teenagers about their rights in the justice system. It was in these grassroots exchanges, she believed, where the seeds of lasting change would ultimately take root. "The system isn't perfect," she told the assembled youth, "and sometimes it fails catastrophically. But knowing your rights, supporting each other, and refusing to accept injustice as inevitable, that's how we begin to transform it, one case at a time." What Jasmine didn't share with the teenagers was the contents of a classified briefing she had received that morning, revealing that several powerful figures connected to AmeriCorps Holdings remained untouched by the investigation. Individuals whose political connections and financial resources placed them seemingly beyond accountability. That fight against the entrenched powers that profited from discrimination at the highest levels would be her next challenge. But as she looked at the young faces before her, hungry for knowledge and justice, Jasmine knew it was a battle worth fighting, no matter how powerful the opposition. The system could be changed from within, but only when enough people were willing to risk everything to expose its failures. Judge Thornton had been wrong about one crucial thing: the powerful weren't invincible when faced with truth, and the collective demand for justice. The story of Jasmine Wilson Reynolds teaches us that systemic injustice can only thrive in darkness. When brave individuals shine light on corruption, even the most entrenched systems can be transformed. True justice requires vigilance, as discrimination often hides behind legal proceedings and official titles. The case demonstrates how racism in the justice system isn't just about individual prejudice, but can be driven by financial incentives that commodify human suffering. We learn that fighting for justice is rarely straightforward. It demands persistence through setbacks, betrayal, and danger. Jasmine's journey reminds us that sometimes we must work within flawed systems to change them, building alliances with others who share our values. Perhaps most importantly, this story reveals that no one is powerless. A single person who refuses to accept injustice can ignite a movement that brings accountability to those who thought themselves untouchable. Change happens not just through dramatic courtroom revelations, but through the daily work of ordinary people committed to fairness, transparency, and equal treatment under the law. What systems of injustice have you witnessed in your own community, and what could be done to address them? Comment below with your thoughts or experiences. If Jasmine's fight for justice resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that expose discrimination and celebrate those brave enough to stand against it. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that one person really can make a difference. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the corridors of justice. Remember, in the words of Martin Luther King Jr., the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, especially when we commit ourselves to bending it.